Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar on leveraging financing landscape for achieving the Paris Agreement agenda. My name is Ranjit Jose and I will be your host this afternoon. Today's webinar brings together representatives from the Government of Indonesia, the United Nations, the Embassy of France, and the European Union to present and exchange experiences on climate financing initiatives. This discussion is a platform to reflect on the past 5 years since the adoption of the Paris Agreement and to take stock of where we are today. As we begin our event this afternoon, may I please request the resident representative of UNDP Indonesia, Pak Nuri Masa Shimamura, to say a few words. Pak Nuri, over to you.
Thank you very much. Ambassador of France, His Excellency Mr. Olivier Chambard, Ambassador of the European Union, His Excellency Mr. Vincent Pickett, Bapak Dr. Lucky Alfreman, Director General of Risk Management and Budget Financing, Ministry of Finance of Indonesia, distinguished speakers and representatives, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, selamat siang. 5 years ago, 195 countries came together and agreed to the first ever global pact aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The signatories agreed to curb carbon emissions in an effort to avert the adverse effects of climate change by keeping the global temperature rise to under 2 degrees Celsius. A few months before this historic meeting that took place in Paris, the United Nations embarked on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, an ambitious agenda that addresses the needs of people in both the developed and developing world through a set of 17 interrelated goals known as SDGs. With the emphasis on inclusion and ensuring that no one is left behind, as countries work in partnership to achieve these goals, the agenda addresses the 3 dimensions of sustainable development: social, economic, and environment. Indeed, both agendas are complementary. SDGs cannot be achieved without making progresses for the Paris Agreement, and vice versa. It has now been 5 years since both these commitments were adopted. It's time for us to take stock. Where are we with our ambitions, particularly in the face of COVID-19 pandemic? The COVID-19 pandemic is expected to cause severe setback to our development gains in the long run. A recent joint study by UNDP and the University of Denver has revealed that over 250 million people worldwide could be pushed into extreme poverty by 2030 under a high damage scenario. This will make the total number of people living in extreme poverty at around 1 billion people, many of whom will be affected by climate change and the increasing frequency of disasters that may occur. But the study also offers some clues for solutions. With SDG-focused investment, which includes climate actions, it estimates that close to 150 million people could be lifted out of extreme poverty by 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, the message of the report is crystal clear. The COVID-19 pandemic is arguably the most pressing crisis in our current lifetime. But if we amp up our focus on SDG-aligned investment or financing, then we will be able to avert the crisis in a long run. And now is the time to do so. The COVID-19 pandemic reminds us that the future of our planet and people is pretty much intertwined. And this adds more urgency to the Paris Agreement. Indonesia and France both have made significant commitments to reduce emissions. France, as well as the European Union, has committed to achieving carbon neutrality by 2050, while Indonesia is eyeing for a 29% unconditional and up to 41% conditional reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Key to meeting the Paris Agreement target is the leveraging of local, national, or transnational financing from public, private, and alternative sources of financing. I'm pleased to observe that Indonesia has taken pioneering steps in raising billions of dollars to close a sizable gap between the available public resources with much needed climate financing and investment. This is crucial as the government estimates that Indonesia would require 246 billion US dollars or 3,461 trillion Indonesian rupiah to meet its climate target, the nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. And we are proud that UNDP has been working closely with the government of Indonesia to provide innovative solutions for climate financing. UNDP's Innovative Finance Lab has worked in partnership with the government of Indonesia to strengthen public climate finance reform that enabled the issuance of almost 3 billion US dollars of sovereign green bond through Islamic financing. It was the first green sukuk or Islamic bond in the world. Now we are supporting Indonesia to develop its SDGs bond, which will be the first sovereign SDGs bond in the Asia and Pacific region. UNDP also partnered with the National Zakat Agency, Basnas, to leverage Zakat funds for renewable energy projects. Furthermore, through the Climate Promise and Partnership for Market Readiness projects, we are working with the government as it prepares for the upcoming presidential regulation on carbon pricing. Even with this dynamic partnership, no entity can provide support to achieve the Paris Agreement target alone. I'm pleased to note that the Paris Agreement has opened up more opportunities to bolster global cooperation on climate financing. In Indonesia, UNDP is developing a comprehensive climate fiscal framework as a mid to long-term national climate change finance strategy and vision, in partnership with the Global Green Growth Initiative and the German development agency GIZ. Together with Sweden, we facilitated the introduction of climate tagging of government budget. Through UN's interagency initiative, UNPage, and in partnership with Denmark, UNDP works to support the effort of Bappenas to achieve green recovery from COVID-19 by promoting circular economy. These are only a part of many other important partnerships that we have. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the forestry sector is the backbone of Indonesia's green economy. Monitoring emissions in this sector is quite instrumental for the country's overall green development pathway. The forestry sector will contribute between 17 to 23% of the overall NDC target. This year, through UNDP, Indonesia has received 103.8 million US dollars of REDD+ results-based payments to invest in climate action. The subnational implementation of REDD+ strategies and policies needs much strengthening, and there is still a big financing gap if we are to stop and reverse deforestation and forest degradation. This year, countries are reviewing the NDCs they made 5 years ago under the Paris Agreement. The Climate Promise helped the government identify several potential mitigation sectors and actions, such as ocean-based solutions, green buildings, and resource efficiency. However, as we are racing against time, we must urgently bolster the financial and ecosystem governance to realize these commitments. UNDP is committed to continue to work with a wide range of stakeholders to help develop strategic and innovative solutions as Indonesia continues to advance towards its targets. Before closing, I'd like to express my gratitude to the French Embassy in Jakarta for working with us to organize this important commemoration of the Paris Agreement despite the challenges posed by COVID-19. Through this conversation, I hope we will further inspire ourselves to pursue even more innovative climate financing schemes. Merci beaucoup. Terima kasih. And now I'd like to pass the floor to Ambassador of European Union, Ambassador Pickett. You have the floor.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Terima kasih. dear Norimasa Shimanara, head of the particularly dear colleague, the Ambassador of France, to be with you for marking the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. Tomorrow, several world leaders will come together to recognize the resolve of so many countries across the globe in working towards a safer, more resilient world with net zero greenhouse gas emissions. During the past 5 years, the climate resolve of the international community has been tested, and especially, of course, during the past 10 months. And in the midst of the pandemic, one asks oneself the question, is it realistic to call for stronger global action to fight climate change? The European Union believes that it is realistic. In fact, we consider it necessary. And I think that the disaster scenarios described by the director of UNDP shows very clearly what could happen if we do nothing. And we cannot afford to let things worsen clearly. Now, even before the pandemic, the European Union and its member states committed to leading the green transition. In December last year, the European Commission launched the so-called European Green Deal, a new growth model and roadmap to achieve climate neutrality in the EU by 2050. Now, a year later, we are busy aligning our policies in areas ranging from energy to industry, farming, food, and biodiversity with our sustainability goals. To reach climate neutrality by 2050, today in Brussels, the EU leaders are discussing our intermediary target for 2030. And the target is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% compared to the year 1990. These targets will give predictability to our businesses, our industry, and our citizens. Predictability for investment, for technological development, and for consumer choices. It will also accelerate the fast decrease in the price of low carbon technologies. For instance, the cost of solar photovoltaics declined by 82% between 2010 and 2019, and this will go on. Achieving the 55% target by 2030 will help the EU to save 100 billion euros, it is estimated, over the next decade, and up to 3 trillion euros by the year 2050. That, of course, is all great, and we're proud of it, but in the global context, we know that the EU's climate action will not suffice on its own. And that's why we will pursue all avenues of cooperation with our international partners through strategic agreements, trade and investment policy, development assistance, and other financing tools. We will operate as Team Europe, that is to say, the EU and the EU member states together. Already, the ranks of the net zero countries are growing. Japan has joined the EU and has adopted the 2050 climate neutrality goal as well. Others are working in the same direction, including China, South Korea, and South Africa. Canada announced a new law on climate neutrality, and President-elect Biden has indicated that the US will move in the same direction. The EU and Indonesia have built a strong cooperation over many years on renewable energy, smart green cities, circular economy, and forest and ocean governance. Indonesia has also joined the International Platform for Sustainable Finance. It will boost green finance and redirect capital to climate friendly investment. Of course, Indonesia's and the EU's starting points for creating the green economy may be different, but I know Indonesia's long-term objectives are the same as ours. The EU and its member states are keen to expand our green agenda with Indonesia and work together towards common goals. We have already started talks about that with the government along these lines, and we hope to be able to agree a green partnership between the EU and Indonesia in a very near future. There is now a sense of global momentum emerging towards keeping the promise of the Paris Agreement and securing our future on this planet. Net zero emissions is becoming the new normal for the mid-century outlook. And together we will also deliver the 100 billion of climate financing, US dollars of climate financing to developing countries. We can still avoid the most dramatic impacts of climate change on our societies. Our global, regional, national, local, and individual recovery plans are an opportunity to build back better. We owe that to the next generation. I look forward, therefore, to a close cooperation with Indonesia and to the dialogue of this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Vincent Piquet. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd now like to call on His Excellency Mr. Olivier Chambard, the Ambassador of France to Indonesia and Timor-Leste, to take the floor.
Thank you very much. Dear Vincent Piquet, Ambassador of the European Union, dear Mr. Norimasa Shimomura, Resident Representative of UNDP, dear representative of Indonesian authorities, dear speakers and participants, I wish you a good afternoon and a warm welcome. It is a pleasure to be here with you today to discuss green finance on the occasion of the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. I would like to thank the UNDP and the team in the French Embassy for their solid teamwork in organizing this webinar. Green finances, which will be discussed today, are of the utmost importance for the future of our planet. Indeed, we have a common goal that concerns us all, so it is time to share our knowledge and strategies in fighting global warming. Global warming is, of course, the biggest environmental challenge our planet is facing, and I think all of the people present today understand the gravity of the situation. The consequences, I will not elaborate on that because it will take us more than a day. Global warming has, of course, an impact on nature, but also on all the living beings, including us humans. So let's take a look back at the COP21 in Paris. Today, we are celebrating the exceptional mobilization of the international community, which led to the adoption of the first Universal Climate Agreement, what has often been called the spirit of Paris. The Paris Agreement's long-term temperature goal, as my friend from UNDP said, is to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change by keeping a global temperature rise well below 2 degrees Celsius, and to pursue efforts to limit the increase under 1.5 degrees Celsius. Unfortunately, we are far from this target. The World Meteorological Organization estimates that the period from 2016 to 2020 has seen the highest temperatures ever recorded. However, for the Paris Agreement to be fully implemented and to produce the desired effects, all state parties have to raise their climate ambition as quickly as possible. France's efforts in the fight against climate change are also a great contribution to the collective effort of the European Union that Vincent Piquet talked about. Furthermore, the financial aspects of the Paris Agreement include a dimension of solidarity and transition. Although public funding for the climate, whether bilateral or multilateral, plays a driving role in favor of low carbon development. Currently, France is acting as the European and international at the European and international level to align financial flows with climate objectives in order to support the ambitious and rapid implementation of the European Green Deal, which is proposed by the European Commission, in particular the terms of public and private financing of the climate actions. France also supports the International Platform for Sustainable Finance, which was set up by the European Commission. The agreement aims to strengthen the ability of countries to deal with the impacts of climate change. Consequently, Indonesia has pledged to reduce its greenhouse gas emission by 29% by 2030, and France's objectives is to achieve carbon neutrality at a national level by 2050. Those are very ambitious challenges. Since COP21, France has made the fight against global warming its top priority. With 1.55 million euros, France has become the second largest contributor to the Green Fund for the period 2020-2023. For Indonesia, considering its large population and immense natural resources, applying effective environmental approaches has never been easy. Ecological transition is challenging Indonesia and all countries in the world. But we all agree on one thing, that low carbon initiatives need to speed up. Energy consumptions, including natural resources, exploitation and industrialization, bring disaster to our ecosystem. Therefore, we need to promote the transition to renewable and sustainable energy that respects the environment. Fortunately, to answer this challenge, Indonesia and France have initiated several joint projects. First, French company Green Buildings initiatives to support agro-fuel development in Indonesia. To achieve this goal, both countries simultaneously work on creating an ecological and sustainable economy and empowering the local farmers. This is a project bearer of hopes and that must be supported. The second example is the collaboration between French company Engie and Indonesia company PT Supreme Energy in a geothermal energy project. Both companies built in West Sumatra their first geothermal plant in the world and started their commercial activities in 2019. This project has distributed electricity to approximately 340,000 households. Geothermal energy is renewable, non-intermittent and eco-friendly source of energy that is both efficient and economical. It is clear that we need finances to develop projects that respect the environment and our planet. The economy must go hand in hand with ecological issues. And this is the hardest part, changing the economic system. For example, we cannot tell farmers or fishermen to stop doing their work because of environmental problems. But surely we can give them reasons to a greener transition by providing innovative elements to them. This is the reason why we need green finance. It is essential that we continue these steps for respecting our commitments at the Paris Agreement and to continue to innovate. The response to the climate change challenge is global and require European but also international cooperation. Therefore, it is a real pleasure to see that we are continuously committed in fighting climate change, even 5 years after the Paris Agreement, which proves the success of this event. This webinar on green finances is a chance to share and learn more about the subject. This is also an opportunity to develop new projects together in the future. And now we'll end here. And thank you very much for your presence in this webinar and wish you very fruitful talks and exchanges. Terima kasih banyak.
Thank you very much, His Excellency, for your remarks. We'd now like to call on our keynote speaker for this afternoon, Dr. Luki Alfirman, who's the Director General of Risk Management and Budget Financing at the Ministry of Finance. Dr. Luki, over to you.
Thank you very much. His Excellency, Mr. Vincent Piquet, Ambassador of the EU to Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam, His Excellency Mr. Olivier Chambard, French Ambassador to Indonesia and Timor-Leste, Mr. Norimasa Shimomura, UNDP President Representative, distinguished speakers, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Very good afternoon to all of you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I would like to greet all of you, prominent speakers, all participants of the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement webinar. I would like to extend my appreciation to this forum and UNDP and forum partners for organizing and inviting me to today's event that brings together government institutions, private sectors, civil societies, academics, and the young generation to promote Indonesia's social and economic growth. As today's event is to discuss leveraging financing landscape for achieving the Paris Agreement, I would like to emphasize emission commitments and share what the government has done and will do to combat climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia once again is very serious and committed in combating climate change. The country is highly vulnerable to the adverse impacts of climate change and understand that it should respond effectively in a more systematic way. We have pledged our strong commitment to shift the economy to a low carbon and climate resilient development path that has been integrated in our development policies, strategies, and program. The policy direction for national priorities related to the environment and climate change consists of improving the environmental quality, enhancing disaster and climate resilience, and low carbon development. As a responsible member of the global community, Indonesia has ratified the Paris Agreement in 2016 and submitted its nationally determined contribution NDC. Indonesia has committed to reduce greenhouse gas emission by 29% from the business as usual scenario in 2030, using its own resources, or known as the unconditional reduction targets. With international support, the target would be increased to a 41% reduction. At the national level, Indonesia has set the institutional framework and strategies to combat climate change through the National Action Plan on Climate Mitigation, Climate Adaptation, and Biodiversity. Those green initiatives are crucial to support Indonesia's commitment to combat climate change and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. As a part of strong commitment toward climate change issues, the government of Indonesia has recently introduced what's so-called Omnibus Bill on Job Creation, which aim at promoting economic development, trade and investment, while at the same time supporting Indonesia's commitment to further address ESG issues, both in government and private sector levels. This has been reflected in a number of articles in Omnibus Bill. For instance, the law stipulates requirement for environmental license or permit to obtain business license, requirement for investors to establish environmental rehabilitation fund, and precautionary measures to prevent degradation of ecosystem and biodiversity losses. This Omnibus Bill provides legislative framework to promote economic development, trade and investment, and enhance competitiveness while balancing out environmental concerns. Our homework right now is to issue what's so-called implementing regulation in these 3 months, starting October, and hopefully this omnibus bill will can start effectively implementing in early 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a fact that climate change action are relatively costly. Estimation on the required financial resources to meet Indonesia emission reduction targets vary. However, just one example, that estimation by second biennial update report stated that around 3,461 trillion rupiah, or around $247 billion is needed to meet the unconditional emission reduction targets. Government so far spending on climate change has been at the level around 373 billion rupiah or around 26 billion US dollar in the period of 2016 and 2019. So by looking at this current trend, a significant budget gap to achieve the target set in NDC should be expected. However, we know for sure the cost of doing nothing will be even larger. This is why government has to be creative and innovative in putting the right enabling policy instruments to fill in the financing gap. In this endeavor, Minister of Finance has developed budget-taking mechanism to mainstream the national budget that correlates with the climate change impact. It is a performance-based budgeting system, and it is embedded into the national budgeting system. The system enables government institutions to identify and to assess the expenditure related to climate change mitigation. With the rapid development of global green bond market in recent years, the Ministry of Finance could see the opportunity to develop new and innovative instruments to finance green projects. We then developed the Green Bond and Green Sukuk framework that sets out the management and use of proceeds, project eligibility and criteria, and reporting mechanism of green bond or sukuk sovereign issuance by the government. The framework has been reviewed by a leading independent reviewer, Cicero from Norway, and given medium green status. And as Mr. Nari mentioned earlier, we'd like to thank UNDP for your support in developing and executing the Indonesia first global green sukuk. And this year is already the third year we issue this green sukuk. In addition, Indonesia also has been very conscious of the importance of promoting the environmental, social, and corporate governance, or ESG. So my unit right now, so far, first initiatives have already been introduced, including the issuance of green sukuk. And this year, we also have issued what's so-called cash wakafling sukuk to encourage private sector's participation, as well as wealthy or philanthropy investors to support Indonesia development agenda, especially related to reduced poverty and income equality. Going forward, Ministry of Finance is currently in the stage of exploring and reviewing the SDG bond issuance. On the governance issues, the initiative of Satu Data Indonesia will serve as an integrated data system to increase effectiveness and transparency. Ladies and gentlemen, according to the National Medium-Term Development Plan 2020-2024, infrastructure financing gap in Indonesia is even larger compared to the previous term. Around 42% of total infrastructure investment needs is targeted coming from the private sectors. So to deal with the target, business as usual could not be implemented, or the key here is to blend or combine public funding with private financing. So that's why in Indonesia, we came up with this new initiative, what's so-called SDG Indonesia One platform. It was launched in 2018. It's designed to mobilize private capital for sustainable infrastructure using blended finance. The SDG Indonesia One covers 6 programs, which are good health and well-being, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, industry, innovation, infrastructure, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, and climate action. So far, the SDG Indonesia One has been building collaboration with various partners with the total funding achieving 3.03 billion US dollar. Certain examples of concrete action facilitated facilitated by the PT SMI during the 2 years operation, including reconstruction and rehabilitation in vulnerable communities and disaster areas. I'm talking particular what happened in Palu, Sigi, and Donggala in Central Sulawesi Province. Geothermal energy upstream development project in Wayasano and Jailolo, regional infrastructure development fund for hospital project, just to name a few. Currently, we are developing more links and integration between government program and those in the SIU to really support the achievement of SDG in the near future, especially during this pandemic. In particular, the SDG Indonesia 1 may be combined with the public funding, the new public funding such as Regional Balance Fund, Special Allocation Fund, and Village Fund. I'm talking about this local government development under recently National Economic Recovery Program. That's one of the breakthrough to support also development in local regional governments. So in this excellent opportunity, I encourage all development partners from domestic and international, non-government organization, green fund, philanthropists, and other private sectors to collaborate to support this SDG Indonesia 1 platform. I believe that a lot of parties have the interest, including other partners who has concern in clean energy, low carbon tech, and SDGs. Ladies and gentlemen, as mentioned before, Indonesia is the first sovereign Green Sukuk issuer in the world, and the leadership has brought benefit to Indonesia. The rise of Green Sukuk initiative helped to grow the global Sukuk market in the long term, as the current crisis could encourage potential new issuers. In 2018 and 2019, government of Indonesia has successfully entered the market and issued our first and second global green Sukuk in the amount of $1.25 billion and $750 million respectively. The issuance of 2018, this Green Sukuk represent the world's debut sovereign Green Sukuk issuance and the first ever issuance under the public newly established Green Bond and Green Sukuk framework. These issuances represent the government commitment, leadership, and contribution in global sustainable financing, as well as it has been able to attract foreign investors who are shifting toward sustainable corporate practices, specifically towards Sharia-based sustainable financing. Amid the uncertainty of global market conditions due to COVID-19, in June 2020, the government of Indonesia has again successfully issued the third global Green Sukuk with the amount $750 million. Some of the achievements of this issuance are the lowest coupon rate for 5 years tenor, oversubscription over 7 times, and successfully attracted a large number of global green investors, around 34% of the total value of Green Sukuk issuance. In the domestic market, government of Indonesia has issued the first retail Green Sukuk in the world, actually, in November 2019, and sold to the individuals through online platform, with the total issuance at that time around 1.46 trillion rupiah. The issuance attract around 3,000 new investors, and interestingly, 51% of the total investors are millennials generations. And just early this month, the second retail Green Sukuk was issued, which attracted almost 17,000 investors, with the total issuance is even larger at the amount of 5.4 trillion rupiah. In February 2019 and also March 2020, government of Indonesia has published its first and second annual Green Sukuk report. The report has also gained assurance from KPMG for the first report and PwC for the second report on the suitability of Green Sukuk issuance process with the framework. So government of Indonesia is very committed to transparent reporting of its climate financing. According to the report, projected emission reduction from global Green Sukuk issuance is 5.7 million tons of CO2 for the first issuance 2018 and 3.2 million tons of CO2 equivalent second issuance 2019. It has covered 5 sectors, namely renewable energy, energy efficiency, improving climate resilience for vulnerable areas, sustainable transportation, and waste management to waste to energy. Ladies and gentlemen, all of us prone to the adverse impact of climate change. And climate change needs an effective response. Climate finance is quite costly and requires a strong global collaboration of government, businesses, multilateral institutions, NGOs, and global communities. However, based on our Green Sukuk issuance experience, it needs strong commitment, leadership, and coordination due to long process required and many stakeholders involved in both designing green framework and financing green impact report. However, if we want to encourage more and more sovereign or corporate businesses to issue these green financing instruments, I think we need communities should be able to provide more incentive, to offer more incentive for them to show this green paper can be attractive. One of them, of course, is pricing benefit. So if we can offer somehow that by going green, by issuing green paper, that issuer can get this pricing benefit, we believe that there will be more and more issuer coming to the market with these thematic bonds, like green bonds, blue bonds, SDG bond, ESG bond, you name it. So the government of Indonesia invites support from all stakeholders in developing sustainable finance program in Indonesia. We also encourage other sovereigns, private sectors, and state-owned enterprises to follow government initiative by issuing green bond or green sukuk to combat climate change impact. We are excited to share our experience with other countries and to enhance collaboration and partnership among global stakeholders. My Deputy Director, Pak Nana, will be one of the speakers. He will be happy to share with you more detailed experience, how we issue this global green sukuk as well as this retail green sukuk. Indonesia stands ready to make real action to support this agenda. We hope that today's event can be another important milestone towards sustainable finance to grow more in the future. Thank you and have a good and productive discussion. Very good afternoon.
Thank you, John.
On 12 December 2015, the parties reached a landmark agreement at the 21st Conference of the Parties COP21 of the UNFCCC in Paris to combat climate change and to accelerate and intensify the actions and investments needed for a sustainable low-carbon future. The central objective is to keep the increase in global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit the increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The agreement brings all nations to a common cause to undertake ambitious efforts to combat climate change and adapt to its effects, with enhanced support to assist developing nations to do so. The 2020 COP was also to be the first global stocktake of greenhouse gas emissions. But due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this conference was postponed until November 2021. Yet neither the need to deliver on the agreement nor the climate crisis has been postponed, and commitments on green recovery from the pandemic, on building back better, are being made. Before the pandemic, the World Economic Forum projected by 2020 about $5.7 trillion will need to be invested annually in green infrastructure, much of which will be in today's developing world. The financing gap is further broadened by the unprecedented socio-economic shock brought by COVID-19. The necessity of exploring innovative financing for climate action is more than ever. To discuss the vital issue of financing, a central element of the Paris Agreement, UNDP and the Embassy of France in Indonesia will host a webinar titled Leveraging the Financing Landscape for Meeting the Paris Agreement, as part of the commemoration of the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement of UNFCCC, which will be covered 2 topics: Islamic financing for climate change and carbon market mechanisms. Islamic finance has emerged as an effective tool for financing development. The industry has expanded rapidly over the past decade, growing at 10 to 12% annually, while carbon pricing captured the better value of clean energy and helped limit the increase of global temperatures. According to the data from the World Bank, in 2020, current regional, national, and subnational carbon pricing initiatives would cover 12 gigatons of equivalent carbon dioxide, representing 22.3% of global GHG emissions. The objective of the webinar is to share experience and ideas of innovative structures and financial instruments to enable the leverage of development finance, Islamic finance, and private sector finance for climate change.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would now like to begin our panel discussions for the afternoon. The topic of our first panel is Islamic Financing for Climate Change. This will be moderated by Ms. Joan Mander, who is the Regional Advisor for Climate Change and Innovative Finance at UNDP. Ms. Joan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ranjit, and it's a real pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening for those who are joining from far and wide. Salamat sore and Assalamu alaikum. This afternoon, we have a couple of excellent speakers who will talk to us and share some of their experiences on directing Islamic financing for climate change. We're joined this afternoon by Dr. Nana Riana, who is the Deputy Director at the Directorate of Islamic Financing, the Directorate General of Financing and Risk Management in the Ministry of Finance here in Indonesia. He's also the Director of SBSN, which is a special purpose vehicle of the government for issuing Islamic government securities. We're also joined in this panel by Mr. Zenathan Hassanuddin, who is the Associate Economic Affairs Officer and focal point for climate finance at UNESCAP. He researches on macroeconomics and international trade. And before joining UNESCAP, he was also working for IMF and OECD. So you can imagine that the conversation this afternoon will be very rich. Both Dr. Nana Riana and Mr. Zenathan Hassanuddin will have a presentation for us, after which we will then go into a short Q&A session. So perhaps let me start off first by inviting Dr. Riana, if you can go ahead with your presentation. Over to you, Pak Nana. We cannot hear you, Pak.
Oh, thank you, John. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you very well.
Thank you. It's very nice to see you again. Very nice to see you again. I would like to share my screen, please. If I have a... Is that clear?
We can't see anything yet, Pak. Yeah, okay. I think it's coming on. All right, here we are.
Is it clear now? Is it clear now?
Yes, we can see you.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you, John. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss and share our experience about the Islamic financing for climate change in this good opportunity. I would like to share our experience, how we issue our green sukuk both in global market and also in domestic market. As you know that our country is one of the world's largest archipelago in the world, comprised of more than 17,000 islands, with an area more than 700 million hectares, with the coastlines length of the coastline more than 95 kilometers, with the land territory more than 200 million hectares. Therefore, Indonesia is very, very vulnerable to the climate change. That's why more than 80% of disaster in Indonesia is highly correlated to hydrometeorological disasters. And on the other hand, the emission of carbon dioxide in Indonesia is increasingly significantly increasing from 2000 until 2016. The Indonesian greenhouse gas emission is predicted to increase more than 50%, which mounted up like more than 1 million giga carbon dioxide emissions. For this reason, the country, the government has so strong commitment to combat the climate change. In 2016, we, as you know, that we ratified the Paris Agreement to UNFCCC, and on that, after that Paris Agreement, we also pledged our NDC, nationally determined contribution, that by 2030, Indonesia pledged to reduce greenhouse gas emission from 29% up to 49% with the international support. In line with that commitment, we also we also produce national action plan for greenhouse gas emission reduction, and also national action plan for climate change adaptation, GRK or REN-AP. And all our commitments here, we are integrated to our medium-term goals on our objectives, that how we can have like low carbon development plan in our country. And all commitments here are in relation or related with the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And my question is, why we have to go with Islamic issuance, in this case green sukuks? There are at least several considerations why Islamic issuance chooses in this case instead of a conventional bond. We have like two perspectives here. First is practical perspectives. This is from our practical perspective, Indonesian practical perspective in case of green sukuk. And the second one is related to academic perspective. In terms of practical perspective, why we choose the green sukuk instead of a green bond? The first one is because there is a similarity of issuance structure. Regular sukuk issuance requires underlying projects or assets to comply with Sharia principles. This is similar with the green sukuk, where green sukuk has to be covered, has to be underlined by underlying project or assets as required by green bond or green sukuk framework. In this case, conventional bonds do not need underlying projects or assets in the issuance. So this is very similar to the issuance structures. That's why we choose the green sukuk for climate change adaptation and mitigation activities. And the second one is related to legal standing. In our law number 19/2008 on Islamic government securities, there is a stipulation, there is a regulation that Islamic government securities or sukuk are issued not only for budget financing, but also for project financing. It means that Islamic issuance has a strong legal standing to be used to finance the project. On the other hand, Law Number 24, 2002 on government securities, which is conventional one, do not regulate that the conventional bond can be used for project financing. This is why, for this perspective, we have similarity with the issuance structure, and we have legal standing. That's why we choose, we goes to the market by issue the green sukuk instead of a green bond. In terms of academic perspective, Islamic finance is truly sustainable finance. So Islamic finance is indeed sustainable finance, since in Islamic finance, it is supported by a legitimate transaction. We not allowed to use like speculative. We do not harmful to the mankind, society, nor the environment. And we also formalize transaction via a legitimate contract like akad. The concept of Islamic finance are similar in this case, very similar to the objectives of ESG, environment, social, and corporate governance, and also in line with the SRI, sustainable, responsible impact investing, and also ethical finance frameworks. There are many principles of Islamic financing and also investment that are complementary to sustainable investing. In this case, both sustainable financing and also Islamic financing focus on creating financial systems and applications that are more responsive to the real economy and also provide more holistic approach for all stakeholders. So in this case, the industry nowadays is seeking an entry point to the wider SRI community, but there is of course a challenge, a big challenge to assessing whether we can combine values, disciplines, and governance codes to the best efforts. That's the academic perspective. That's why we go to start issuing the green sukuk, and the issuance of green sukuk is not a short process. It's long journey. We have to decide first about the green bond or green sukuk framework. With the great assistance from UNDP Indonesia, we designed the green bond green sukuk framework. After that, we try to issue green sukuk in a global market. And this is our green bond or green sukuk framework. We have 4 pillars: use of proceeds, project evaluation and selection, management of proceeds, and also reporting. And under this framework, we also have 9 eligible sectors that in line with our framework, which are the renewable energy, resilient to climate change, sustainable agriculture, until energy and waste management. This framework are already reviewed by our external reviewer, Cicero from Norway, and Cicero categorized our framework as medium green shading. And our 9 eligible sectors start from ranging from renewable energy until the sustainable agriculture. We have to make sure that all proceeds that issued by coming from the green sukuk issuance has to fall under these 9 eligible sectors. And we also have like a project evaluation and project selection to make sure that the project that have been funded by the proceeds of the green sukuk really fall under the eligible sectors within the framework. And we've been issuing the green sukuk in our global markets 3rd time. In 2018, we come to the market with 1.25 billion US dollar. 2019, we issue 750 million US dollar, and the last one we issue in 2020 with 750 million US dollar. And the big achievement of our green sukuk issuance in global market is in last issuance, which is we get the coupon ever for 5 years tenor, and we have oversubscribed more than seven times of the book order. And the most important thing is that the number of the green investors increased significantly from 29% from the 2018 and 2019. And 2020, the total of green investor increased to 34% of the total. In line with our initiative in the global market, we also issue retail green sukuk in our domestic market. This is the first green sukuk retail, the retail green sukuk in the world, I believe. We issue in 2019 with 1.46 trillion IDR, and in the last one we issue in this year, last month, we issue around 5.4 trillion IDR with total participation of the investor mostly coming from the millennials investor. And all the proceeds from green sukuk retail in our domestic market will be utilized to finance resilient to climate change and sustainable transport. And the most important thing of the green sukuk retail in our domestic market is that this instrument sold to the public using the using online system. It means every single Indonesian individuals can tap the market, can buy this instrument by using gadgets, by using mobile phone, by using website. It's very convenient and easy access, 24 hours, 7 days in a week. It's very easy, very handy for the investor to participate in this issuance. As part of our commitment to the issuance of the green sukuk, we also publish the green sukuk report twice. The first is in February 2019 for 2018 issuance, and this report all has been audited by KPMG. And the second one we issued last March 2020, and this one has been audited by PwC. And we have also approval by Sharia advisor from all over the world, from CIMB Islamic, from Citi, Dubai Islamic Bank, HSBC Middle East, and also we have Sharia approval from the Indonesia Council of Ulama. And for the allocation, in 2018 and 2019, we've been allocated to, the proceed has been allocated to 5 eligible sectors: renewable energy, energy efficiency, improving climate resilience, sustainable transportation, and waste management. And the majority of the allocation of green sukuk in last 2 years has been allocated to sustainable transportation. How about the 2020 issuance? The proceeds of 2020 issuance will be allocated to 3 eligible sectors here: resilience to climate change, waste energy, and sustainable transport. And how much the projected emission of the carbon dioxide reduction from the issuance 2018 and 2019? For the first issuance in 2018, the total amount of more than 5.7 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent has been reduced by the green sukuk's issuance. And from 2019 issuance, it is projected 3.2 million tons of CO2 equivalent. This is the there is some significant decrease of the total projected emission of the reduction of the carbon dioxide equivalent, because in 2019 issuance there are more adaptation action compared to 2018. That's why the projected emission of carbon dioxide equivalent is reducing. And what can we learn from our green sukuk issuance? There are a couple of things that we need to take concern about the issuance. The first is synergy. The issuance of the green sukuk is costly and really needs a strong collaboration between ministries, within the ministries in Indonesia. Why? Because it's not the job only of the Ministry of Finance. Ministry of Finance only handle with the financing sectors, but the owners of the project belongs to the line ministers, ministers of public works, ministers of transportation, and so on. That's why it needs to increase synergy among stakeholders to formulate policies and national development programs that related to climate control. The second one is impact investing. How we can measure that the project of the Green Sukuk has been benefiting not only on the environmental aspect but also on the social and also economic aspect. That's, I think, the big challenge for us to measure the impact investing of the Green Sukuk. Then the third one is about the system integration, the strengthening and integrating the mechanism of climate budget taking CBT on one hand with other systems like SRI, AXA, and Krishna to create effective and efficient financial governance and reporting. That's why every stakeholders in a Green Sukuk should be able to access this system so they can know easily how much the impact of the Green Sukuks that issued by the government. I think that's all. Thank you. I offer to you, Johan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pak Nana. You've covered a lot of ground in your presentation. And in fact, just in terms of what we're trying to address in this conversation, you've really given us some excellent examples of Indonesia leading the way in leveraging Islamic finance for climate change impacts. Your presentation also has been able to show us that not only are we talking Islamic finance in terms of large-scale investors, as in your issuance of the Green Sukuk in 2019 and 2020, but also you've started even looking at leveraging Islamic finance at an individual level through your retail Sukuk. So this is very exciting. However, let me just ask you to hold on a little bit, because just looking at our time, I think it's good if we have Mr. Hassanuddin to make his presentation, and then we'll loop back to you in terms of some questions from the audience. Just to also let the audience know, please go ahead and put your questions and comments in the comments tab, and then we will come back to them after this next presentation. So, Mr. Hassanuddin, please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Johan. It's very nice of you. Excellency, distinguished speaker, participant, ladies and gentlemen. Selamat sore, a very good afternoon from Bangkok. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let me try to share my screen first. I hope it will go well. Just give me a second. Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Now thank you for Panana giving a very thorough explanation about Sukuk, Green Sukuk. Now I'm kind of like giving some additional instrument, that Islamic finance instrument that could also use by the country like Indonesia. But before that, let me go through a bit regional things and give some hard fact. If you see the SDG, we've heard a lot during this meeting. This is what ESCAP estimate from last year, the latest one from last year. You see in 2019, there are no single SDG that touch the point where it should be. Even this is even worse for climate action. As you see below in the number 13, it's actually regress, not advancing the progress. The picture is a bit better for the Southeast Asia. As you see, there's some progress on that, but still it's very slow compared for others like quality education and in industrial infrastructure. Climate action is very lagging. Under these circumstances, and then we now have COVID, it hits a lot on the capability of the government. They have a deteriorating fiscal balance, pushing more. Normally it goes between 1% and 2%. Now most countries goes beyond 5%, even larger. So this kind of like background give us some kind of idea that we're facing a lot of wave of problems. So as you see in the picture, we're probably thinking that washing our hands could be our panacea to save our world. But there's a lot of things happening. COVID is just like small things, but then after that, there's some recession. And of course, climate change and biodiversity collapse. After having a lot of growth in the last centuries, that's also something that we need to take care of. So coming to this, the Paris Agreement in 2015 mentioning that we need to target 2 degrees Celsius by the next 2030. So under this, the Islamic finance can also be the gap, bridge the finance gap to achieve this SDG and to transition to green economy. How this kind of Islamic finance linked to green economy? So the characteristic of Islamic finance are really strict. It was very nice regulated, but the point is it must avoid riba. There's no interest less as conventional finance have. And of course, there's cannot be some speculation and gambling, and it should be halal. Now, climate finance fit to this. And also it brings a need, as mentioned before, a local, national, and private sector need to be also participate other than the government. So this kind of like explanation would be kind of like fit well together why Islamic finance can also address the climate. So let me give some idea as well. Here, this is the latest data in 2017. It is a bit outdated, but it's still kind of reflecting what we have now. On the graph, you can see most of the Islamic finance are coming from banking sector. Most of it coming from MENA region, and then some coming from Southeast Asia, of course, from Asia, where Malaysia and Indonesia is kind of leading on that. Well, but recently we also see some kind of improvement in sukuk. As Panana mentioned, there's a lot of demand in green sukuk as well. So this kind of things is the main driver, let's say, instrument to transition to low carbon green economy. Of course, we aim by the end to have a carbon neutrality. As mentioned earlier in the opening, there's some kind of Green New Deal pledged by the advanced economies mostly to achieve carbon neutral, while Indonesia also giving a lot of effort to achieve this. So let me back again to my presentation, and then I'm providing some kind of like what kind of instrument that we can think of that can lead between Islamic finance to address climate change. So the instrument that I mentioned here was kind of discussed this year under invitation of UN Secretary General, Prime Minister of Canada, and Prime Minister of Jamaica back in March to gather UN system, partner countries, and also civil society to come up with some ideas. And it's been agreed during the side event on the General Assembly. This kind of like instrument that we can discuss further. So I just mentioned briefly here, I have 5 instruments that could be linked together and we can discuss further. The first one is the very traditional one, blended finance using zakat and wakaf and sadaqah for sure. And second, as green sukuk, it's also having some its own highlight to address the climate finance, climate issues. And then we should also address Islamic banking. We should push more on the shifting the mindset of the banking sector and then Islamic banking sector to allocate more funds to the climate projects. Well, other thing that the other two that a bit innovative or mix of it is the introduction of debt for climate or debt for SDG swap. This is very factual because during the COVID, the government, a lot of governments and probably private sector increasing their debt because of all the difficulties. So the debt for climate, debt for SDG swap is also one of the idea. And of course, a PPP could be also used to finance the climate finance adaptation and mitigation project. How it links to the Islamic finance, I will come back to that a bit later. So again, on the first instrument, this is a very traditional instrument. For you, if you don't know, zakat is kind of like a mandatory giving of 2.5% of your income above a certain threshold in 1 year. And then wakaf is actually just donating your asset for greater purpose when sadaqah is counted as charity. You see in the table that I present here, the growth of zakat, wakaf, and sadaqah increased very fast. Compared to GDP growth is in another level. By 2016, we have 393 million USD. However, this amount is really low compared to the potential. I think I read some paper from World Bank and Islamic Development Bank. It's actually only 3% of the amount of zakat could be collected by using this scenario, using the business as usual scenario. So there's a lot of potential not even fully utilized on that. Now, this kind of traditional instrument could be and should be addressed as well climate change effort. But the idea is just nudging the use of proceeds, because we know zakat and wakaf is very good on distributing the income between the have and don't have. So we need to some kind of like nudging the use of proceeds to finance a green project. Like for example, in the picture, you can see some renewable solar energy and then hydropower or just like planting new mangrove. That's kind of like allocating a fund that we have and nudging to the more greener projects. But however, this is a very difficult task as well, since we need to have some kind of training and awareness with the organization that collect zakat, wakaf, and sadaqah. So this needs a lot of participation to again change the mindset of the stakeholders on this area. I think on second instrument is a green sukuk. I think I don't need to say a lot of this because Panana very well described on the green sukuk, but I give you some broader perspective. This is from data from Climate Bond Initiative. You see from 2014, 2019, there's exponential growth in the green bond, sorry. And on top of that, there's another thematic bond, let's say theme bond, that have social and sustainability perspective. While from this green sukuk, probably we have around 200. So it's really small compared to overall global green bond issuance. While we only have 12 issuers coming from only Indonesia, Malaysia, United Arab Emirates, and Islamic Development Banks on a total of 9.5 billion. This graph could also showing a better perspective. As you see, Indonesia is very successful on issuing the green sukuk from 2018 until 2020, as Panana mentioned. But then it's only 1% of the total green sukuk issuance. That's also, so it means that's a lot of more potential. Even compared to Malaysia, it has 16%. So the difference between Indonesia and Malaysia, for giving some example, is that the private sector is not in Indonesia, not yet going into this market. So again, we can see clearly that the government have a lot of expertise now, and then why not we share those into the private sector so the market will be deepened. So in this point of view, I think it is good to have a joint collaboration between UN system, government, and private sector, probably like Chamber of Commerce, to also push this idea on issuing green sukuk for a better market and also to finance the climate project. But we see also probably this year it's a bit low on the green sukuk issuance because the COVID changed people behavior or make it wait and see. I saw some countries in the region change from initially they want to have, like, for example, green bond, but then they put as a normal bond because they want to have the money to finance social or other project to tackling the COVID impact. So I think one other important keys here on the green sukuk issuance, there's additional difficulties. And mostly not even the later step, even like the first stage, when you identify what project could be part of use of proceed, there's a lot of private sector or even governments that back off. Well, you see on the half of this process is basically the same as normal bond issuance, but then the first and the last one is the most challenging. We see it as the most challenging part. Well, so that's why there's not many entities want to issue this green sukuk. However, Panana mentioned there's a lot of additional costs when issuing this green sukuk. We see a new kind of like new initiative coming. We see from World Bank and BBVA, a leading bank in Spain. They issue a green bond blockchain. So it's kind of like minimizing the cost using the new technology, but of course the infrastructure is not ready yet. But we are looking forward to some kind of like more technology into this bond market, and why not green sukuk is also can be part of it. And as Panana mentioned, the online system already there, but we can capitalize more to gain more market and more issuers, of course. Just giving a bit more example of what green sukuk can be based on. That's I mean, normally it paid for the infrastructure, let's say, and renewable energy. But don't forget, it's also we could also pay for we use the green sukuk to finance transportation and also housing project, like real estate. I know this is like Indonesia, we have like backlog on the housing. So that's why a green project on the real estate can be also one of the use of proceed. Probably government part can be part of it, but this is also something that private sector should look on. Beyond the green sukuk, I think Paluki mentioned, there's a lot of opportunity. A lot of bond have a theme like green, social, blue, even catastrophic or pandemic bond. It could be converted into sukuk. So as we discussed earlier, a sukuk and bond is pretty much similar, but using the use of proceed is a bit different. How its financing is a bit different, but the concept is mostly the same. As long as we have the right framework, and it could be the evaluation could be verified by the third party, that should be no issues in issuing the team bond. So a lot of investment need to be put in front, and then later on it's just gaining some experience to have it more. This is especially relevant like in Malaysia, when the government and private sector now has the ability to issue the team bond or green sukuk on this case. The third one, I think I want to go a bit more on the sustainable Islamic banking. This is a very interesting part as well. And I see in Indonesia, we have a big merger in the national owned Islamic bank. And we see people also getting some interest in Islamic banking. Probably 10, 15 years ago, we see Islamic banking and conventional banking as just the same. But now we see people start to distinguish. And based on data in 2017, the growth of the banking deposit for Islamic banking actually much higher than conventional banking. And this is especially true in Indonesia. while people start to have like more conscious on the benefit of Islamic banking, and also more religious issues are coming on the behavior. When you see interest rate is not a good way of kind of like doing things in finance, so Islamic banking kind of like offer that additional value to people. There's a lot of how the banking instrument offer their product with use of leasing, purchase and sale, and partnership and investment. But the beauty of the Islamic banking is that there's no limitation of funding the project solely from Islamic banking. It means that if the government or the private sector have a project, it could have a mix of Islamic finance structure, and conventional debt. So, and this kind of role, Islamic banking as the biggest lenders could take a big role in this part to push more against Islamic banking to finance the project, a climate project. Again, this is about some kind of like nudging the behavior. Normally in Indonesia, there's still a lot of brown sector. So banking sector, Islamic bankers need to see a bit more on their portfolio. So and when giving loan, they should also see if this benefit the climate project, if this a climate friendly project or not. So that's kind of behavior we need to push forward. And that's kind of like nicely in the global standard and national standard, we have those kind of principle of giving some people more incentive of financing a green project. In Indonesia, we have regulation on sustainable finance issued by the OJK in 2017. And that also covers the Islamic banking. So this is an important part while pushing banking sector to also look on the green project to be financed. Just to give you some example, we last year SCAP and partners having some short survey for a financial institution across the region, mostly in Southeast Asia and South Asia. We see how aware their institution into the environment and social risk management. We see country like Philippines because I think and Bangladesh, Sri Lanka because they're kind of like have a lot of pressure from the disaster risk. They're kind of like aware on this kind of environment issue. While Indonesia, we see a lot of our respondents a bit less believe on the kind of like environment and social risk problem, but the trend is it's keep increasing. The awareness is still need to be moving, and I mentioned earlier how the normal practice need to be changed. The loan need to be also addressed to the environment and social project, let's say. And you see here, country like Sri Lanka and Bangladesh now, their financial institution thinking that their loan to the green project is actually perform very well compared to Indonesia, Myanmar, for example. It's a kind of like okay, it's loan performance between green project and non-green project is a bit similar, but we should see and we should promote this kind of behavior more and more. I would like to move now on kind of like a new idea on the financing climate, and also part of it is with the Islamic finance. This is a bit new one, and we probably have some innovative things. We see a good example multilaterally and bilateral example on the climate or SDG debt swap. In multilateral example, we see WWF is really promoting this and therefore nature. And our sister organization, ACLAC, also push this agenda, and also this is already been promoted by the UN Secretary General to have a debt for climate adaptation swap, especially in the Caribbean, when their debt level is more than 90% of the GDP. So this is a very, very important issue, especially under the COVID, when the debt is accumulated very, very quickly. Some bilateral example also we have in Indonesia, for example, with Germany in 2007 and 2017, and also with US aid, while Indonesia also benefit the program. I think there's a bit more successful example bilaterally or within countries rather than multilateral, because it's quite complicated process, but it gives them a lot of benefit. What are the issues is that the mechanism is really complicated, but then it's something that worth it. For example, if you see the scheme that I present here, normally and the above one, normally the government or private sector gives some debt service obligation to the creditor. But in here, we adding some more institution, one more institution that could facilitate and kind of like more being the mediary of this process to finance a green project or socially project. And this kind of like, I probably like something like SDG Indonesia one, or something that could be put together with a lot of stakeholders. We're thinking of working together with the Development Bank and international finance institution, and also partners to have this kind of mechanism. What's interesting is that we throw out this kind of idea, and for some countries like Kazakhstan, they said, oh, government probably don't have much debt, but then the private sector want to have this kind of scheme. So what we can do? So that's also a lot of interest coming on this one. And the benefit of having the strong intermediary role is that it could also be as a guarantor or in mudarabah scheme or sharing scheme. And also it could issue a new green sukuk from this body to finance the project, and also to return the payment to donors. So that's kind of things that interesting to overlook on.
Park, can you take just a couple more minutes? I think.
Sure, I was about to finish. One other thing is the infrastructure PPP. How this link into Islamic finance and infrastructure PPP is. This is very linked because, as mentioned, the Islamic finance is really need to be backed by assets, and then infrastructure PPP is really fit in. ASCAP promoting this PPP, we have a network, and we have the web portal when we can we accumulate project across our member states, and then investor can chip into the project and see what their project, their goal look on the project. So to conclude, we need some partnership approach between government, private sector in United Nations, CSO in international organization to promote this climate financing. And Islamic finance is one of good tools on that. Thank you very much for the attention, and looking forward for a question. Thank you. Over to you, Joanne.
Thank you so much, Park. That was fascinating and a very clear. I mean, there was a lot that you covered, of course, but it was a very clear outline of just how flexible and the number of options that we actually have when we're talking about Islamic finance, and how Islamic finance can be leveraged to work together with other forms of finance in order to achieve the Paris Agreement. So some very exciting ideas across both presentations. I'm looking at a couple of questions here, and I'm conscious that our time is not, doing us any favors, but we'll try and take about 5 minutes. I've got a couple of questions here. The first question is from Mansour, who is wanting to ask Paknana, can you tell us a little bit about the gender roles in climate change and how the sukuk might have been trying to address gender as well? And then also a question also on the green sukuk from Marisa from IPB. One of the main reasons that renewable energy development in Indonesia is often considered not bankable enough, as there are still not enough data about how much the benefits that can be gained from the renewable energy, which result in low private investment in our renewable energy. Could you elaborate further about how the Green Sukuk will give incentive for renewable energy projects in the country? As also, I remember that under Sharia law, you shouldn't invest in risky activities. Perhaps, Nana, you can tell us a little bit, respond to those two questions, and then I'll come back to Hassanuddin. Yeah.
Thank you, John. What was the first one before? Sorry.
The first one was around gender. How is gender?
Yeah.
How are we addressing gender in the book? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the question. However, in terms of gender issues, our Green Sukuk framework is not incorporated with the gender issues. But don't worry, we are developing the framework right now. So the Green Sukuk framework will be elaborated more and will be updated to the SDG framework in the future. So not only the green sectors will be covered by the framework, but also all SDG sectors will be covered by the framework. So we also can go to the market by using the same framework to issue green sukuk, green bond, and also to issue SDG bonds. Next year, inshallah, the framework will be available in our government to issue the SDG bonds, and hopefully 2021, yeah, we're gonna issue the SDG bonds. So this framework will gonna cover the gender issues as well. Thank you. And for the second one, it's about the energy sectors project that highly considered as highly risk. We can say that our green sukuk issuance is using the underlying projects of green project that has been covered in our national budget or APBN. So in this, that's why we use the project that has been covered in the APBN, because there's the high certainty there. We do not use the low certainty project in our underlying. Why we use the project that covered in our national budget? Because any single amounts of the rupiah is there is already budgeted by the line ministers, and also had been finalized by the law of the APBN law. So this is the high certainty here. If you're talking about the project of energy efficiency project, I believe you're talking about something else. I believe you're talking about something like a project bond or project sukuk. In this case, in our sukuk here, in Green Sukuk here, we use underlying project underlying, not project financing or project bond or project sukuk. So there are different things between project financing sukuk and project underlying sukuk. If we're using project underlying sukuk, it means that we use project that has been covered, has been coped with within our national budget or APBN. But if project financing, it means that the process of the project will be directly earmarked to the certain project of the efficient energy project. I hope that's going to answer the question.
Thank you so much, Pak. Maybe let's move on to Pak Zenathan and ask you some quick questions. One question is around, what have been the biggest challenges? If you're looking at the Indonesia market, what would you say are the biggest challenges in deploying Islamic finance in the way that you've described here? Particularly, give us some of the challenges around the banking sector, Islamic banking, and tell us a little bit about what are some of the challenges for deploying Islamic finance instruments to achieve climate change outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. I think the biggest challenge that we can implement in Islamic banking, for example, is that the mindset or the people is still thinking that there's no difference between Islamic banking and conventional banking. This is partly true because the professional in banking sector, in Islamic banking sector, normally coming from the conventional one. So the way of thinking, the way of doing things is still pretty much the same. But I see some changes now. New generation, new perspective on Islamic banking, how to implement it thoroughly is a bit different. As I mentioned, and we see in the news, the governments try to push the merger between big national banks, Sharia banks. That will give some new power for the Islamic banking to spread out. But we also need to invite international teams. I mean, competition from international Islamic banking need also to be invited in Indonesia to have a bigger pool of projects. And then again, shifting mindset. This Islamic banking need also to finance a green project. They need to understand that now the time is right to do that. And we cannot support brown sector anymore. We need to have more money to be put in the renewable energy, climate mitigation and adaptation project, and so forth. So I think that's the most challenging part, when we need to shift people mindset from normal and the similarity of between conventional and Islamic, and we go to the Islamic banking fully with all the benefits. Thank you.
Okay, just one last question for you. I mean, given the COVID crisis and the pandemic, you started off with that interesting slide of the different waves. How have you found COVID affecting the work in Islamic finance? Has there been a positive or negative impact? And have you seen an upsurge of Islamic finance providers maybe stepping up to support the COVID response as well? And if so, can this also be translated into climate change a bit more?
Thank you. I think for this year, is people pretty much wait and see, because a lot of changes are going on, a lot of hits. People can to wait and see. But the demand to look again on Islamic finance is very huge. ASCAP, for example, with a partner like UNITAR and other in North Central Asia, for example, they're demanding how Islamic finance can also help. I even contact Minister of Finance of Indonesia if they could share their experience for green sukuk to be how to issue the green sukuk in the globally, or even in the domestic market with retail part. So there's a lot of you see, when the COVID hits, it means that we need some additional or innovative financing, and people also look Islamic finance as part of it. So it could fit into bigger picture when people start to asking what can we do more, and Islamic finance could also be one good option. Thank you, John.
Yeah. No, thank you so much, Pak. And both you and Pak Nana have really highlighted some really exciting opportunities in the financing sector. Certainly, Islamic finance has has a very big role to play, and particularly in countries such as Indonesia, where stakeholders can quickly come up to speed in terms of Sharia law principles and financial principles that can come together on the SDGs. Unfortunately, our time is actually what's been our biggest binding constraint here. We have a second session that also has to take off. And so I think we will draw a line here. Thank you very much to both of you for your insights and your presentations. Thank you for, really highlighting some of the opportunities that are out there. And I think these are areas that we'll all be able to look into after this event. I know that the webinar organizers will also be filling in answers to the questions that have been tabled. So for those who are participating, please realize that we will get back to you with presentations and with some of the answers to the questions. That's it from me. Perhaps let me hand over back to Ranjit. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Lia Zakia. I'm now currently working at the Institute of Sustainable Earth and Resources in Universitas Indonesia. I'm managing research collaboration on climate change with universities in Indonesia and Australia.
My name is Ratnat Pitular. I'm the former Minister of Environment of Indonesia and the former envoy of President for climate change of Indonesia.
In 2015, when I was working for the Office of the President Special Envoy for Climate Change, I was, assigned to go to COP and help in the Indonesia Pavilion to organize seminars and talk shows and activities around there, and then also to create some events related to youth actions, not only in Indonesia, but also engaging youth across the globe. So that was my main role, and it was my first time coming to COP21 in 2015, to any COP actually, so it was very exciting for me.
When I was appointed by the President to lead the delegation to COP21, of course I'm very proud, because it gives me and the delegation an opportunity to fight against the climate change with the rest of the world through the COP21 in Paris.
I was very amazed of how the French government organized that huge event, very landmark event. I think it was a very successful COP because we have a lot of global leaders stating their commitments to climate actions, and then we can say that COP21 is a successful COP. So I was very fortunate to be part of that event with all the narratives that are going on.
When we came to the event, we were very impressed that the organizers have introduced us into a very pleasant but productive environment.
I was super excited when my office assigned me to go, because I've never been to any COP before. So that was my first experience, and I had a lot of hope on that, and I met a lot of people that and work connections that until now we're still keeping in touch, and then do some work together. So that COP21 was really meaningful to me in terms of my understanding of how the UNFCCC works, and how countries can use COP as a platform to communicate to the wider audience, globally about their climate actions.
COP21 in Paris is very important because it recognizes the importance of the third world, of the NGOs, of everybody, not only government. So it is very important, and it gives a very good impression to the whole world. Although the COP is very serious, but we have become friends, and with the French Minister of Environment, the COP the President of the COP, even given me a watch engraved with his name here until I wear until now, and it is in my memory.
My hope that all of us, the governments, private sectors, NGOs, communities, individuals, you and I, will put more attention and then put more actions on climate change, because we don't have much time. We only have 7 years and a few more days based on the climate clock if we are to limit the increase of temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius. So we really need to get our act together and do the individual changes as well as systemic and wide changes in the governments, and that this is us facing one of the biggest threat of human population, and I think we need to take this as an urgent matter, that we have to transition to a low carbon economy and faster than what we are doing right now.
I think at this opportunity I'd like to extend congratulations to the French government, to those who have attended COP21, and congratulations for the good work done, and we hope that we can work again together to proceed to fight the climate change. So congratulations. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'd now like to proceed with our second panel discussion for the afternoon. This one is on carbon market mechanisms and will be moderated by Monsieur Stéphane Dever, who's the head of cooperation at the Embassy of France. Mr. Dever, over to you. I'm so sorry to interrupt, Monsieur Dever. We cannot hear you. I believe your mic may be muted. I'm sorry.
Yes, it was. I'm very sorry.
All right, please proceed.
Yeah, I just want to get back a little bit to the past, because it's important to understand what is the importance of our commitment right now and what was the importance of the Paris Agreement and what should be done from Paris Agreement. The Kyoto Protocol is probably the first landmark. It was adopted on December 11, 1997. And Kyoto Protocol operationalized, as you probably remember, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and committed countries to reduce greenhouse gases emissions. So it raised, at this time, 1997, tremendous hopes and expectation. But there were no constraints associated to Kyoto Protocol, and then for 18 long years, nothing happens, or so little. And as Lia, the young lady we have just seen in watching the film, mentioned, we are running out of time, and that's why Paris Agreement has been so crucial, I think. 5 years ago, for the first time ever, a large majority of world nations decided to set a common target, a real common target, towards a global temperature increase below 2 degrees Celsius, if not 1.5, above pre-industrial levels. Accordingly, each and every country had to set carbon emission reduction goals. And we are all delighted to see that many of the big global warming contributors, including EU and France, are now aligned to the idea of carbon neutrality goals. When there is a will, there is a way. as we commonly say, but now we are really under pressure to prove that it's right. And there is no way to fight against climate change without proper financing. That's why, along with UNDP, we have chosen to celebrate this 50th anniversary by addressing the question of financial landscape. Here we are, and carbon market mechanisms definitely have a huge role to play, as Islamic financing does, as we have just seen. To disclose what is really at stake in terms of carbon market mechanisms, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our two speakers. Andy Samyanugraha, carbon market specialist at UNDP in Indonesia. Welcome, Andy. And Marion Fetter, research fellow, country and climate budgeting from the Institute for Climate Economy. Let's start with Andy Samyanugraha, better known as Sam. Sam, you are technical officer for market-based instrument in UNDP in Indonesia. You are working to support Indonesia in increasing its readiness to implement innovative, result-based, carbon price-based incentive mechanism. The aim is, of course, to scale up the country climate change mitigation actions. Sam, you hold a master degree in sustainable technology from University of Boras. And before joining UNDP, you worked for environmental support program with Danida, and you have been Indonesia negotiator for market-based issues under UNFCCC negotiations, and you worked for National Council on Climate Change as head of Carbon Trade Mechanism Division. Sam, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this opportunity. Please allow me to share my screen. I have, let's see, this one. Okay, can you see my screen? I hope you guys can see my screen. I would like to convey some information regarding the works we have been doing in improving readiness towards carbon pricing implementation in Indonesia. So a previous speaker have already conveyed the main reason on why carbon pricing mechanism is necessary, and that is in regards of the lack of funding, insufficient funding to to achieve our mitigation target or our NDC target. Previous speaker have already conveyed information about how much money is estimated as needed if Indonesia wants to achieve its NDC target. And we can conclude that it is impossible for the government budget alone to cover that budget. So we need to promote non-party stakeholders' participation in achieving the NDC target in more specifically way in how they can invest more towards green projects, climate mitigation, and so on. And that's where carbon pricing are coming into place, because we believe that carbon pricing are policy tools that can deliver cost-effective and scaled-up delivery of real, additional, and permanent emission reductions. We already know that many countries have been implementing carbon pricing instruments in the form of emission trading system and carbon taxes around the world. You can see the map here, and the green color represents that those countries that already implement or are scheduling ETS implementation, where we know EU is the pioneer on this field, and the blue one represent countries that already implement or scheduling carbon tax implementation, and the yellow countries are those who are considering carbon pricing instruments. And you can see that in this map, Indonesia is among the one that is considering carbon pricing instruments. And we also know now that Indonesia is developing a presidential regulation on carbon pricing. And if this policy come into place, then Indonesia can, move up the ladder, not only considering, but we can say maybe scheduling or even implementing the carbon pricing instruments. The presidential regulation objectives will cover several areas. And first, it will provide policy framework for NDC and its support from carbon pricing. Second one is it will provide general guidelines on carbon pricing implementation. It will provide clarity on carbon pricing governance in Indonesia, both domestically or internationally. And it will also relate it on how Indonesia can or will involve in the Article 6 cooperative approaches under the Paris Agreement. And next one is the incentive options for those parties or for those people who would like to scale up their climate action. It will provide legal framework for innovative environmental financing. And the last one, it will support environmental financing instruments development. So the policy is quite broad, but the focus is on carbon pricing implementation. The policy development process itself has been started since the November last year, 2019, where it was kicked off around in Jakarta, and it was the process was formally announced during a cabinet meeting on carbon pricing in July 2020, where the president himself led the cabinet meeting. And the first public consultation on the draft regulation was held a couple of weeks ago in this month, December 2020. So in terms of time, I think I will go on to the readiness status of Indonesia in terms of implementing carbon pricing instrument. I categorize the readiness element according to the OECD report in 2010, where we have several readiness elements categorized into three broad categories. First is the policy category. So if we see from the first readiness element, if Indonesia wants to implement carbon pricing instrument, first we need to have identify our mitigation potential and cost. This is very important because most carbon pricing instrument, especially if it is a mandatory carbon pricing instrument, will involve some kind of emission cap. And to set the emission cap, we need a very good information about this mitigation potential and cost. We don't want a cap that is too tight that can hurt our developing economy. And in the contrary, we don't want an emission cap that is too loose that does not reflect our ambition and contribution to the global mitigation action. And in this area, we have been doing some works, and the reason one is that we have identified mitigation potential and cost for power sector and 8 energy-intensive industries. The second element is in terms of selecting appropriate policy design. And choosing policy design, of course, is very important. That we need to ensure that the policies, whether it is directly related to climate change or indirectly related, like energy policies and so on, can be harmonized. And in these terms of areas, we have been working on some of the modeling on analysis on emissions and economic impact of several carbon pricing scenarios in Indonesia. And I believe presidential regulation on carbon pricing will provide the how those policies can somehow work together and harmonize through a carbon pricing implementation framework. About sharing possible carbon revenues is also very important and have been questioned by many people. And in this area, I believe that President's regulation on carbon pricing will also provide the carbon pricing, the implementation framework of sharing possible carbon revenues. And also, I would like to mention that some of our works and also previous work under the government of Indonesia have been incorporate this aspect into their modeling. And then the next one is the policies to encourage pilot activities. We have been working also in this area, and now Indonesia have been developing a domestic crediting mechanism. And it has been piloted recently, last year, actually, in Jambi. So if everything goes well, and also with this presidential regulation, I believe Indonesia will have a domestic crediting mechanism that will generate a domestic carbon credit in near future. And also voluntary pilot activities of carbon pricing is now being developed in power sector. So power sector is among sectors that relatively ready in terms of our technical, in terms of the technical readiness, which I will touch later on. So the second category is our technical readiness status, and this is a core technical readiness that for some sectors have been quite well developed in Indonesia. The first element is in terms of coverage, where we should be able to cover what kind of what sectors will be covered in our carbon pricing instruments and so on and so on. For our domestic crediting mechanism, or we call the Indonesia Certified Emission Reduction Mechanism, the coverage of that mechanism is already defined. And for our upcoming voluntary pilot in power sector, it is now being discussed. But the initial idea is that maybe in this voluntary pilot in the power sector, the coverage will be coal power plant above 100 megawatt in capacity. And then regarding the reference or baseline year emission, which is very important to set the target, we have developed, or Indonesia already have emission baselines for power sector and 8 energy intensive industries. And combined with the potential and cost of mitigation identified, I believe this is a very a good capital for us to develop the emission cap later on. Next one is the MRP system, and in regard of this MRP system, Indonesia now already have MRP guidelines for power, cement, and fertilizer industries, and those guidelines are specific for those subsectors. There is also an online GHG reporting tool for power sector, which is now operational, where power plants can, put in their activity data. And then the system will help them to automatically calculate how much emission they emit for a year. And the MRP guideline for the domestic crediting mechanism and also the methodologies now already being developed. In terms of registry, also this is very important and quite challenging for Indonesia, I think. So this registry is very important to track either the issuance of credit, the allocation of allowance, or and so on. But the main goal or the main function of the registry is to ensure that every transfer or every use of a carbon unit can be tracked and traced. And in this regard, we already have this national registry system, or SRN, now is established in the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, and it is now continuously being improved to enable the system to track the issuance of credits of mitigation action, that is in particular those mitigation actions that registered under the ISER mechanism. And also, SRN is now being improved with the ability to log transactions, which is needed to track domestic transfer and use of carbon units. And the last category of the readiness status is in terms of institutional and legal readiness. And I would like to share the readiness status on this category, starting from the responsibility for collecting emissions data, which is very important because we need to have good information on how much exactly a facility or an entity or an organization emits GHG gases. And for this area, at the national level, the one who is responsible for collecting emissions data is the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, but the technical line ministry, like the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, and also the Ministry of Industry, is the responsible parties to collect facility level emissions data for power and industry sector. In terms of legal framework, it has been implemented in each ministries, and have been assisted by the reporting tools, just like what I mentioned before. In terms of issuance of trading units, this is also very important, and for now, it will depend on which ministries will organize and operationalize the carbon pricing instrument. For example, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry will be responsible to issue carbon credits or ISER, and the MEMR will be responsible for issuing trading units related to the upcoming piloting in the power sector. Some institutional and legal challenges also will be there, of course, but we will, steps or efforts to overcome those challenges is continuously taken by those ministries. In terms of GHG and performance and verification, which is very important because there is a say that in the carbon market world that the say says that a ton is a ton, and to ensure that a ton is a ton, the verification capacity is very important, including on who will do the verification, who can conduct the verification, what kind of competency standard established, and so on and so on. And for this, the ministries, in particular MEMR and the Ministry of Industry, will become the responsible institution to verify facility level emissions data for power and industry sector. But for our carbon credit mechanism, we will use third-party verificator accredited under the Indonesian National Standard for GHG Management, which is actually the same as the ISO standard on GHG management, the ISO 14064, and so on. And current status is that we Indonesia already have 3 companies accredited as third-party verifier under this SNI ISO standard. In terms of compliance, this is something that I expect that the draft presidential regulation for carbon pricing will provide the framework on compliance, as well as on how to regulate trading, whether the carbon unit can be traded over the counter or does it have to be traded under some kind of exchange, and so on and so on. This will also be regulated under the carbon pricing policy. And last one is about the stakeholder involvement. In the PMR activities, we have consult like around 140 power plants and 160 industries, but of course it is not a number that we can say, oh, it's enough. We still need to improve it. But in terms of the development of this carbon pricing regulation, public consultation also have been held. The first one had been held around 2 weeks ago, and I'm sure that a subsequent public consultation will be held in the near future. So I would like to conclude my presentation with some points, Stefan. First is in terms of readiness, I believe there is never a state of 100% ready. We will always need to improve, and there will always be a room for improvement. So continuous improvement in terms of extending the scope and coverage, elaborating the potential or updating the readiness element will always be there. And second one, that I believe the Indonesian market readiness has been accelerated to a level that could enable limited piloting. So voluntary pilots should be encouraged, which is now being developed in the Ministry of Energy and Ministry of Environment, and then followed with mandatory pilot when the regulation like emission cap is established. And the last one is that the upcoming presidential regulation on carbon pricing, it will become an essential regulation umbrella. It will become a policy basis to implement carbon pricing in Indonesia. But however, there are many technical details that are still not regulated or defined in that draft regulation. So I believe the related ministry, after this regulation is issued, will have to work hard, to fill that detail gap with guidelines, etc. And I believe this is an area where international community, donors, etc., can work together and help the government in developing this carbon pricing instrument implementation in Indonesia. And my proposed priority areas of work are, working design of each carbon pricing instrument first, and then second one is the MRV related elements like, how to set baseline for subsectors, target, emission cap, methodology, etc., etc. And the last but not least, of course, capacity building. And I believe it is strengthened with international experience sharing and lesson learned. It will be more beneficial for carbon pricing implementation in Indonesia. Thank you very much for the time. I will stop here. Back to you, Stefan. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. It was really a very interesting presentation, because too often we consider that we just have to decide, the mechanism has to be set, and that's all. And you have proven that it has to be well thought, it has to be well elaborated before being implemented, and that is not as simple as that. You just have to proceed wisely, otherwise a great idea could turn to a failure. So it's very important. And then you raise the idea, and it's very complicated to balance the time requested to set a perfect scheme and the emergency, in a way, to address the issue. So I think we will have plenty of questions afterward. I'm very sure, Sam. I have some, personally. Let's move to our second speakers, and we will have the Q&A session afterward. Our second speaker is Marion Fete. Marion Fete joined I4C to work on green budgeting, which is an assessment of public revenues and expenditures from an ecological point of view. The objective is to develop a tool to scan public budget to highlight what are the positive actions, where efforts have to be done, and what are the measures that have to be discussed in priority. Marion also works on global carbon markets. That's the reason she is with us today. And there's usage of the carbon markets mechanism. Marion holds a master's degree in public policy management from Sciences Po Lille and Audencia Business School in Nantes, if I'm not mistaken. Before joining I4C, Marion worked for greening companies' value chain with the WWF France and for financing solar farms in South Africa. Marion, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation. So I work at the Institute for Climate Economics in France. And today I will present you a study about carbon revenue use. So let me a second to share you my screen. So 1 second more.
Maybe by letting you finding, oh.
Does it work now? Yes. Okay, so as I told you, I will present you a study about carbon revenue use, what is done all over the world with the revenues from carbon tax or from carbon markets. As Sam presented, there are different carbon mechanisms, and so the revenues are used in different ways. So first, I would like to present you a map about carbon revenues all over the world. So you can see in the right upper screen that revenues have increased over time. In 2020, we are almost at $50 billion coming from carbon systems. In red, you can see the revenues coming from a carbon tax, and in blue, you can see the revenue coming from carbon markets, or what we call ETS, emission trading system. So in this map, Sam presented before the map from the World Bank, the carbon pricing dashboard. And this map presents, it is quite similar to the one from the World Bank, but we present only the systems that are already implemented. So you can see that many countries still have no carbon pricing system. For instance, Australia, Russia, India. But it's changing, and the coverage of carbon pricing system is growing. So in 2020, 3 countries joins the initiatives, so Canada, South Africa, and Singapore. So in total, we have 44 countries and 31 provinces that have a carbon pricing system. And altogether, they represent 60% of global GDP. But the price to emit carbon is still very low. If we have a look on the price, on average, the price is still below $10 per ton, which is very low. And it is way below the recommendation from Stern and Stiglitz. The 2 economists, they recommend a price between $40 and $80 per ton. So I will present you today the carbon revenues usage, the possibility that we have to use the carbon revenues. And this presentation is based on the report Using Carbon Revenues. It was written in collaboration with the World Bank and the French Development Agency, AFD. So first, there are many usage for carbon revenues, and I will present you 6 destinations for revenue use. First one, tax reform. So it means that government that has new revenues coming from carbon, they decide that they can decrease other taxes, for instance, tax on labor or tax on revenues. Another usage is debt reduction. Government can use the revenues coming from carbon to reduce their debt. And this is what we call general budget allocation. It is a use for carbon revenues. So other usage for carbon revenues are direct spendings and tax cuts. Direct spendings, it means that we use the carbon revenues for citizens or for poor households to compensate the increasing price for them for fossil fuels, for heatings, or for energy. And tax cuts mean that the government decides to reduce the carbon tax or the carbon price for some citizens or for some sectors, because those citizens or those sectors don't earn enough money, or they are not competitive enough to stay strong with an increasing price on carbon. For instance, farmers in France, they are exempt of the increasing carbon tax on diesel. And this is what we call targeted support. And the last 2 ways to use carbon revenues are projects that fight climate change. So for instance, if you fund a project to retrofit houses with the carbon revenues, it is an example. Or development funding. So for instance, you can use the carbon revenues for education projects or for the health system. And this is what we call earmarking. As I presented to you, there is a wide variety of choices on what to do with carbon revenues. So I will present you this graph a bit more. So in the center of the wheel, you can see that nearly half and half of the carbon revenues are coming from ETS and from carbon tax. The revenues coming from the ETS in the second level of the wheel, you can see that they are coming mainly from the EU ETS. And for the carbon tax, they are coming from many countries or provinces, and France has the highest revenues coming from a carbon tax. And in the third floor, in the third level of the wheel, you can see the different usage of what the countries or provinces are doing with the revenues from carbon system. And 2 usages are predominant. In yellow, you can see that the revenues for budget allocation, for general budget, the revenues used for budget allocation are represented 42% of global revenues coming from carbon. And in green, you can see the revenue used for earmarking projects. they represent 47% of the global carbon revenues. So those two usage take the most of the carbon revenues, but it does not mean that the other usage that I presented to you before are not relevant. Those two usage are predominant highly because of the predominancy of the EU ETS and France. The EU ETS is using its revenues mainly for earmarking, and France is using its revenue mainly for general budget allocation. And so the other usage have already proven that they can be highly successful. And this is what I will present you next slide with some example. So, for example, to present you 4 different ways to use carbon revenues. So in Quebec, in Canada, revenues are allocated to a special fund for green project. So they are doing green earmarking. And Le Fonds Vert is using the revenues for transportation mainly to extend public transport or to electrify the transport means. And the system in Quebec started in 2013 as an ETS, so a carbon market, and it covers today 85% of CO2 emissions in the province. In Sweden, next example, the carbon tax was introduced a long time ago in 1991, and it was introduced at the same moment as a major fiscal reform. So as they introduced a carbon tax, the government decreased other taxes on revenues and on labor. It now generates a lot of revenues in Sweden, and it was really interesting because they were doing it in a major tax reform. Next example in Ireland. So as you know, in 2008, there was an economic crisis in Europe. The debt in Ireland blew up, and Ireland needed money to keep its investors confident to stay strong. So they introduced a carbon tax, and it generates revenue for the general budget, and then they were able to keep the debt at a decent level in Ireland to keep the confidence of investors. And last example that I wanted to show you was Switzerland. In Switzerland, more than 60% of carbon revenues are distributed to households and to companies. So they are doing direct rebate, direct spending to citizens and to companies. The government decreased labor tax for companies, and they decrease social insurance costs for citizens, using carbon revenues to compensate this decrease. So there are different solutions. None is better than the other one. And as Stefan and Sam told you before, the solution must be context-based and depends on different aspects, political, social, economics, and all of that has to be studied in details. And another lesson from the report is that transparency and visibility are key in the success of the carbon pricing system. We have seen that a lot in France with the yellow vest. So it is very important that before the implementation, during the implementation, and after the implementation, transparency and visibility are done to implement the carbon market mechanism, carbon system mechanism, sorry. So before the implementation, it is important to ask, have the stakeholders been consulted? Are they involved in the mechanism introduction and in the decision made for the mechanism? And even after the implementation, is the transparency sufficient on revenue use? Some show that registry is done in Indonesia, and it is very important to continue. Can citizens see what is done with the revenues? What guarantee do they have that their decisions are respected? And how the mechanism is reviewed with the MRV system? Is it every year? Is it every 2 years? By whom? So that there are many questions that have to be answered and explained to citizens many times. Communication is really a key in carbon market systems. So for instance, in California, they have an interactive map showing what projects are funded by carbon revenues, what is done with the revenues. So for instance, a project that they are funding with the revenues from carbon, they have implemented a Clean Car for All program. And this is what you can see on the picture. And in this photo, if a person with a low income crash its old car, then the state will give him or her a voucher to buy a new clean car. So this is really interesting, and it is really showing what the government, what the state is doing with the carbon revenue. Transparency is key, and that's why green budgeting is also a very interesting exercise to show citizens and to show stakeholders how the state is spending its revenues, and especially its carbon revenues. So in Indonesia, it's been a long time since the government has done its climate tagging process in the budget. And in France, this year, the government has done its first report on green budgeting. They have tagged green expenditures, but also brown expenditure. This is what you can see in the picture on your right. This report is a first step to take more actions on reducing emissions and to improve the impact of the state expenditures on the environment. So thank you. It was a quick presentation on carbon revenues, but you can have more information about carbon revenues usage or carbon revenue implementation in this report, and on green budgeting in France in the report here. And I stay at your disposal by email or for the Q&A is coming.
Thanks a lot, Marion. It was a very comprehensive presentation, and it's interesting to see what have been so far the outputs, the results of the various policies that has been implemented here and there. Because for Indonesia, it's of course crucial, because Indonesia is in the midst of the process to implementing. We have various questions, and most of the questions are in fact related to how to share the mechanism, how to make it as inclusive as possible. We have two questions actually on that respect. One is from from one is from Elida Novita, asking if it's possible for smallholder plantation businesses, referring especially on coffee plantation, to get assistance through the carbon mechanisms. So we understand that it's very possible in principle on what is collected, but of course the question is directed to some to know if there is something that is in the mindset of the ones who are working on that. And the other series of questions on that purpose are from Lia Sartika, who appreciates, as a matter of fact, your presentation. And the question is to Sam as well. She is curious about national registry system. Is this already being implemented? If yes, who are the partner already? Or in which provinces or regions this system have been applied? And she would appreciate a bit more explanation about national registry system, as it has been said. And she has another question: where can we access the latest MRV update from the government? Could you direct us to what website we can access? And more globally, I add to that question, is the process of setting this new policy is inclusive? Do you ask for advice of the civil society, companies, or so on? So.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. I would let me start with question from Elida. So just like what Stefan said, theoretically it is possible, and actually that is what government also wants to make it possible. I mean, for example, with the domestic crediting mechanism that is now being developed in the ministry, we are aware that some of the barrier that can prevent some parties to participate in the domestic crediting mechanism is transaction cost. So the design and the in general the design of the carbon crediting mechanism, the domestic carbon crediting mechanism is somehow that can cut the transaction cost without sacrificing the environmental integrity. And if it can be achieved, then small mitigation projects such as the coffee plantation should be able to access the domestic crediting mechanism and hopefully can sell the carbon credit to people who would like to offset their emissions. So in short, yes, it is possible. And the question from Leah about the national registry system is that system is already implemented for more than 3 years. And regarding the partners, well, the development part, the development partners are mainly the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. And in my knowledge, they also receive some supports during the development phase. But during the operational, it is 100% operationalized by the ministry. And in which provinces or regions, well, it is applied in the national level, in the central level. And if you would like to know more about the national registry system, you can access the ministry website, the KLHK website. So to make it easy, maybe you can Google SRN KLHK, then you will be directed to the website. One thing I would like to underline is that the current national registry system is more towards a climate action registry. So you can put information about your climate action, whether it is mitigation, adaptation, or joint mitigation adaptation. But for now, it still cannot be regarded as a market registry. So that's what the government wants to improve. So when the carbon pricing regulation has been issued and when the mechanism itself is in place, the national registry system can also function as the market registry. And regarding the latest MRV update, beside that SRN website, you can also access the SignSmart website. So again, you can Google SignSmart KLHK, and then you will be directed to the particular website where you can find the MRV results in national level. You can find which sectors emits how much, and even to the provincial level. So, yeah, and regarding the process in the carbon pricing policy development, I believe it's quite inclusive for now, but well, of course, like I said before, our standard is different. So some people maybe will say that, no, it's not yet inclusive enough already. Some people will say, well, it's not. But I think, like I said before in my presentation, there are always room for improvement. And I believe that the government has already shown their intentions to, to include as many stakeholders, as much as stakeholders as possible. So a couple of weeks ago, there are public consultation that involving like CSO, private sectors, etc. And I believe there will be also another consultation that is more towards foreign related ministries, and also, and I believe there will be sessions as well. So, and what is important, I think it is to be noted that the Ministry of Environment during that public consultation also opens the chance for every people, CSO, private sector, or whatever, to to provide written input to this draft policy. So it is still possible. Maybe for now, I will stop there. Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sam. I will take another range of question or addressing or trying to give you an idea of what people are thinking about your presentation. So, of course, it's a kind of double approach, because as a matter of fact, it's obvious for everybody that carbon pricing regulation and carbon mechanism are good in terms of carbon emission to reduce carbon emission. But something that is more unclear, and that's why probably Marion raises the point of the transparency, is the destinations of the saving, of the fundings. And you have questions in the chat box about the destination. Does he, for instance, has it to be direct to startups and people who are working directly on global warming and fight against global warming or environmental issue, or could it be used to address some other issues non-directly related, like, for instance, a sanitary crisis as we experience? And of course, you have various approaches, but I would like to know how this kind of thing should be, from your point of view, decided. Marion, your idea about it first.
Well, it's a good question, and what I could say is that it depends on the context, and there is no one solutions or one answer to that. It is very important to look at different criteria. So social aspect, economics aspect, sanitary aspect now, and we have to find a balance between allocation, earmarking, like you said, to special startup that can do climate project or green projects, and because when you do earmarking, it is very easy to be transparent about what you are doing with your revenues coming from carbon. But on the other hand, you have to stay flexible and to be able to answer to other social challenge that can overcome. So you have to find a balance, and this is where green budgeting can be interesting for governments, because when you do your green budgeting, especially when you do the brown tagging, you can see how align our policies and expenditures between them. So if you have different criteria, for instance, social criteria and green criteria, then you can assess these expenditures and see if they are aligned with your goal. So yes, you have to find a balance between flexibility, transparency, allocation, and social context.
Thank you, Marion. Sam, what do you think at this stage of your implementation process? You are of course uphill a lot, but what do you upstream? What are you thinking about budget allocation of what could be got from it?
Yes. I think it is a very important issue to discuss, and Marion had discussed this very well. I think many useful information have been presented by Marion. I support those ideas. But firstly, I would like to also note that this upcoming presidential regulation on carbon pricing, I see it is more like a first portal for Indonesia to implement carbon pricing instrument. There are many details that will be regulated later on in the the ministerial level regulation, and one of them is of course regarding the carbon revenues. But one provision have been there in the draft carbon pricing implementation that is the one that is stating that if there are revenue that government can have from this carbon pricing implementation, there has to be some kind of arrangement that can make adaptation activities. They can also take benefit of that carbon revenue. I think we can start from there. But again, like what Marion said, regarding carbon revenue, we have to see a lot of context. For example, not every carbon pricing instrument can generate revenue for the government, etc. And if it is if the answer is yes, how much revenue can be collected by the government, and how we should manage it. The question about budget allocation, earmarking, etc. It's very basic question, I think. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Sam. Thanks a lot, Marion. It's time to wrap up. I think I had the gentle reminder from Ranjit. I just want to conclude by saying, but by what I have heard from this session, the previous one, is that the key word I will keep is innovation, because I think that either by inventing new financial tools or to adapt the existing ones, we are on the process of trying to find solutions and learning by walking. And we are in a hurry, that's for sure. We have to find a solution. Solutions are there, here and there, and everybody has to run. And I see that it's very, of course, it's very dynamic, it's very promising, and I have heard from the Ministry of Finance, and it's very interesting. And the previous session, that the millennial generation is very much on green sukuk, and I think that this is a sign. If a new generation, the millennial, is now on green sukuk, They can be now on debates on every possible mechanism, financial, new innovative financial mechanisms. And because of the agility of people who are kind of newcomers, they don't have the bad habits to things on the already paved ways. It's good because we can expect a lot. So thank you all. Thank you for this very interesting session. I think that we have to organize plenty more sessions and to see with you, Sam, in a couple of months where you are, at which stage you are in this precise carbon mechanism. Thank you, Ranjit. It's hand over.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hope that you found the discussions insightful. If you'd like a copy of the material that was presented today, be sure to access the link that's provided at the bottom of your screen in the chat box. I'd like to say a special thank you to all of our speakers, our panelists, our two moderators, and of course to all of you for tuning in. Thank you very much. Have a pleasant evening and a great weekend ahead. Thank you and bye-bye.